Betting on sports can be hard, but hiring Morgan & Morgan is easy. Morgan & Morgan is America's largest injury firm. They have over 100 offices nationwide and more than 1,000 lawyers. Their fee is free until they win. Find out more information at forthepeople.com/bestbets or dial #law, that is #529 from your cell phone, and that is FOR, thepeople.com/bestbets. This is a paid advertisement. Hey, warmer brother low, welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Ghost Conceits with myself, Craig Hughes Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. We've got an excellent podcast for you as we're going to be joined in segment number 2 by Blake Lovell, who does such a tremendous job over at Southeastern 16. Taking a look at this wonderful game of college basketball that we all know and love. We're going to be chatting with him about what we've all been seeing from the SEC thus far this season. We're going to be taking a look at just the first month of the season in general, some of his takeaways, good, bad, and indifferent. And then in the final segment, going to get you guys picks and analysis on a very small slate of college basketball for this Monday. 5 games in total as we hit some bank shots. If you do have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of 2 ways to fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at @JDN_D1. Keep in mind, letters EM, naming does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is via an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. Did not get in any Twitter/X questions today, but we had a fun day of college basketball on Sunday. Let's take a look back at it, try to find some trends, and try to get to know these teams a little bit better.
Games from yesterday is Greg buzzing about. Here is the rowdy recap.
Speaking of the SEC, we witnessed a dump trucking by Auburn. They completely take it to Richmond. The Itsy Bitsy Spiders lose this game 98-54, and if you, like me, took the points with Richmond, you're probably very distraught to see that Richmond scored as many points as myself over the final 5+ minutes of this game. They had scored their 54th point at 5:29, and they would not score again. So they were not able to get within the number, as you had a little bit of everything for Auburn going on in this one. They go 13 of 30 from three-point range. They had a 4 of 5 three-point shooting performance from Miles Kelly, who had 15 points. Todd Pettiford was relatively rock solid in this game coming off the bench. You just had everyone firing on all cylinders. Auburn won that rebound battle by a count of 49-31, and for Richmond, they go 6 of 30 from 3 and 16 out of 59 from the floor. So that was not great, to say the least. This was pretty solid, though. The performance that we saw from Purdue, they're able to take down Maryland by a count of 83-78, as for Maryland, they do go 11 of 26 from 3. Purdue, 9 of 26 from 3, but Purdue, they were able to do a rock-solid job in this game of protecting the ball, something that they did not do against Penn State, winning that turnover battle by a count of 10-8, and then Braden Smith was able to put up a double-double, 24 points, 10 assists, so had to like to see that as Jarek Queen, 26 points, 12 rebounds on the flip side for Maryland, but not enough to be able to get the job done in this one. This was more than enough to be able to get the job done, though. UConn on the road against Texas, a statement road win, 76-65. Perhaps we buried UConn a little bit too early as they go 9 of 20 from three-point range. Alex Caravan was back, and he was back with a double-double, 21 points, 11 rebounds. For UConn, they do lose that turnover battle 14-9, but they win the rebound battle 39-25, as Arthur Kaluma did have 20 points, 9 rebounds. Nobody else really stepped up down low for Texas. I will say Trey Johnson was able to supply the team with 24 points in this one. Also being able to supply a lot of scoring. Iowa State, they cover a mono number against Jackson State, 158. No Deshaun Ruffin in this one. For Jackson State, you want to be monitoring that for swag play. But for Iowa State, they have Milan Mimosilovic have 13 points in this game when Jackson State had 13 points. He finished with 18 in total, so slow down a little bit from there. But Joshua Jefferson, 10 points, 13 rebounds. You had off the bench Curtis Jones supplied the team with 19 points. Iowa State, they win that rebound battle 42-29. They win the turnover battle 24-7. Jackson State, 20 made field goals, 24 turnovers. So that was less than tremendous. Louisiana, still the lone team in all of college basketball that is yet to cover a game, as they lose by a count of 69-58 to Louisiana Tech. They were 6.5-point underdogs, and just not a great effort here from Louisiana, who goes 6 of 20 from three-point range. For Louisiana Tech, they go 5 of 13 from 3 with Daniel Bacho, the Bacho man, giving you a double-double, 19 points, 11 rebounds. Did have 16 turnovers from Louisiana Tech, but they won that rebound battle 36-22, so they were able to completely completely manhandled on the glass. Also getting completely manhandled was Memphis. They lose at home to Arkansas State, 85-72. An Arkansas State team that has been able to cover some numbers. And Memphis, prior to this, I believe that they had covered all but 2 of their games thus far this season, but for Memphis, PJ Haggerty showed up. He had 29 points for the team. Off the bench, Shane Janges, 16 points, 12 rebounds, but Musa Cisse, as many points as myself in 10 minutes. That was a little bit less than Savory. And for Arkansas State, they did a nice job being able to get second chances in this game. They win the rebound battle by kind of 44-40. Sloppy game that saw Arkansas State turn the ball over 17 times, but Memphis, they turned the ball over 20 times in this one as well. You also saw a lot of up and down play from Prairie View and Mississippi State. Mississippi State, they win by kind of 91-84, but they were a favorite of well north of 35 points. A lot of places more around about a 38-point favorite, and this was a tight game towards the middle part of the second half. Prairie View had a lead 65-64 with 10 minutes and change remaining before Mississippi State is able to just pull away a little bit. And for Mississippi State, they do go 11-26 from 3, but Prairie View went 10 of 19 from 3-point range. Todd Pettiford, who comes on over from Stony Brook, he had 20 points for the team. He went 4 of 5 from 3-point range for Mississippi State. In the end, they do a solid job of being able to win that rebound battle 35-22 with Michael Nowalko giving you a double-double, 10 points, 10 rebounds, but a little bit airier than expected as Josh Hubbard, he was able to supply the team with 25 points. Also being able to supply a cover with Texas State. They take down Rice. We give our to Lane Kiffin goals by kind of 75-66. Rice has been a pretty solid cover team as well, but for Texas State, 7 of 16 from 3, 18 of 20 at the free throw line with having Tyrell Morgan supply a double-double, 20 points, 10 rebounds. Meanwhile, for Rice, they go just 5 of 18 from 3-point range. Now, to the credit of Rice, they did win the turnover battle 11-6, but not enough to be able to get the job done in this one. This was enough to be able to get the job done, though. Texas A&M, they take it to Texas Tech, 72-67. No JT Toppin for Texas Tech, and that showed up on the boards as for Texas A&M, 18 offensive rebounds, 9 for Texas Tech. A big difference maker along with Texas Tech losing that turnover battle by a count of 18-9 as well. You had Chance McMillan be able to supply the team with 23 points, but on the Texas A&M side of things, Wade Taylor, he stepped up with 19 points. They needed him too because he got a big giant zero burger out of Hayden Hefner, but for Texas A&M, they do a solid job being able to get that win. And then the other game out there in Dickey's Arena, a little bit of an overwhelming game as TCU has been one of your better teams the under in college basketball this season, but Vanderbilt, they put up 83 on them, 83-74. Vanderbilt is able to get the job done as TCU went an uncharacteristic 10 of 17 from 3-point range, but not enough in this game as you had a quartet of guys be able to give you 11 points in this one. Brock Wenzel, Ernest Uday, David Punch, and then you also had that from Tazarian White as well. But for Vanderbilt, they had the best player in this game in Jason Edwards. 30 points off the bench, 13 of 14 at the charity stripe. He was able to do a nice job coming in, giving this team some instant offense. A team that went just 6 of 22 from 3, but 27 of 33 at the free throw line. TCU, 14 out of 26 at the free throw line. And also for TCU, they lose that rebound battle by kind of 37-29, and they lost the turnover battle 18-12. So a little bit less than Savory there. This was Savory, though, if you like Oklahoma State, and we finally gotten over in a Seton Hall game. Seton Hall has been playing a whole bunch of unders thus far this season, as for Seton Hall, they went 7 of 19 from 3. Not enough on this day, though. Oklahoma State, they get the job done 85-76, as Oklahoma State turns the ball over 16 times, Seton Hall 15 times, and for Seton Hall, they did have Isaiah Coleman be able to supply 18 points, but for Oklahoma State, they had 3 different guys off the bench, Arterio Dean, Brandon Newman, and Jamarian Keller, all be able to supply the team with double figures to be able to get that one to the window. If you, like me, had Louisville on Sunday, I feel for you. 76-65, Duke, they get the job done, they get the win, they get the cover after Louisville pretty much led the first 30-plus minutes of this game, though. Louisville, they start out 8 of 11 from 3-point range. They make just 3 out of their final 20. Rain Smith was able to give the team 13 points, and off the bench, they were able to get 20 big ones of Terrence Edwards Jr., but Duke was able to win the turnover battle in this one 15-7. They win the rebound battle 35-34, and Cooper Flagg, a double-double, 20 points, 12 rebounds, does foul out in this one, but Duke, they overcome shooting just 8 of 30 from 3-point range by being able to do a nice job sinking their free throws, going 12 of 14 at the free throw line, and they find a way to persevere against a little bit of a shorthanded Louisville team. Then if you, like me, had the under in UCLA versus Oregon, back-to-back threes in the final 11 seconds pushes it over, and for UCLA, bank was open for Dylan Andrews. He banks in a three with about a half a second remaining. UCLA gets the win by a count of 73-71 as UCLA 12 of 23 from three. Oregon 9 of 21 from three. Just before that, made three by Dylan Andrews. You had one from Jackson Shellstead, who had 11 points. So Nate Biddle was really the main guy for Oregon in this one. 20 points, 10 rebounds. But for UCLA, even though it was a little bit of a collective effort, it was Andrews' big three that pushed the team over the top. And for UCLA, they win the turnover battle 13-9, though they did lose that rebound battle 33-23. But off the bench, Sebastian Mack also able to supply the team with 10 big points. You had a game go to overtime, but stay under. UIC, they get the job done against Dartmouth, though Dartmouth a quality cover there. 69-68 the final as for UIC. 10 of 27 from three-point range, 17 points apiece out of a pair of guys in the backcourt as Jordan Mason along with Javon Jackson were both able to supply that. And for Dartmouth, a little bit more of a respectable team. Ryan Cornish off the bench, 15 points, 6 boards, 5 assists, so a relatively nice, solid effort there. Jacksonville State has been a very intriguing team thus far this season as they've been able to cover a lot of numbers. And against South Alabama, they get another cover, 76-74. South Alabama, they get the win outright, but Jacksonville State holds in there, shooting 12 of 27 from three-point range. You had 22 points off the bench from Jayo Atiku, Jaron Pierre, who's been averaging 24 points per contest, all just 13 in this one, but they were doomed by turnovers. 18 turnovers for Jacksonville State, just 6 for South Alabama. South Alabama, they find a way to persevere. They do get the job done out there, and also being able to get the job done on a team that has been all sorts of brutal against the spread. Iona, I believe that they had just 2 covers thus far this season. 72-63, they take down St. Peter's. As for the Peacocks, they get demolished on the glass, losing that battle 41-33. And for Iona, despite the fact that they turned the ball over 19 times in this one, St. Peter's, who had been hot from three-point range, they go just 5 of 22 from distance. Payson Randolph, he goes 4 of 9 from 3, so that's the team outside of M1, a nice hearty 1 of 13 from distance, so that was very much less than savory. And tell you this, if you had this one, this was less than savory as well. You had New Hampshire in the lead with 4 minutes remaining against Harvard. Opening number was 9.5. Closing number was 7.5. They don't cover either of them. Harvard wins by a count of 72-62. That's a game that I wrote up, and man, I am salty about that one. It's Harvard 24 of 28 at the free throw line to ice that game away. Harvard plays even up on the glass. They lose the turnover battle 19-16, but they did have on their side Robert Hinton, who he was hitting it hard with 15 points in this one, and for New Hampshire, that 5 of 23 three-point shooting, that turned out to be very costly. And then a win but no cover for Cincinnati. They were on to a win against Howard by a count of 84-67, but not enough to be able to cover right around about 27.5 as Blake Harper for Howard. He was able to put in their 23 points. And for Cincinnati, they get back Dan Skillings only for 14 minutes, but they do now have him back in the fold. But as he's been Bendengo down low, 17 points, 6 boards. Cincinnati wins that rebound battle 37-23, and they win the turnover battle 16-13. So another pretty rock-solid effort out there, and a rock-solid effort as well out of Radford. They take down Bucknell by a count of 74-70 for Bucknell. They in this game were able to get the cover as they were a 6.5-point underdog, with Archie Spendone being able to supply the team with 22 points. But Radford out there in what is going to be a very fun Big South, they were able to get that nice win. Operation Fade Chicago State was not in effect on Sunday, and it's a good thing that it was not. They get the cover of 25.5 points, 85-62. St. Louis, they bounce back after that loss against San Francisco, but certainly not firing all cylinders enough to be able to get the cover in this one. They play even up with regards to turnovers. Robbie Avila, though, looked much better in this game. 19 points, 7 boards. He's been coming off of injury. And Gibson Jimerson, 4 made threes. And then perhaps the most stunning thing that we saw, Samford played a 72-47 game. Up-tempo Samford in a total that was north of 150. They win 72-47, so they completely bludgeoned an awesome P team that in this game they had 19 made field goals and they had 16 turnovers. For Samford, they go 11 of 31 from 3, so off in terms of their standard, but Trey Fort along with Riley Allenpatch, both able to supply the team with 15 points, and then Stetson, a team that I believe they have just one cover thus far this season. They remain there. Mercer in overtime, they take them down by a count of 89-83, a game that got all sorts of harebrained and crazy. And what else has been harebrained and crazy? What we've been seeing in college basketball this season, as if you look at the last 7 days in college basketball, 50-50 in terms of the totals. 142 overs, 142 unders, few pushes along the way. Favorites, they've been hitting now about 52% hit rate over the last 7 days, 148, 137, and 4 against the spread. And If you look at the season today, favorites still hitting at just 48.5%, 741, 788, and 23 against the spread, while overs, they have a slim lead on unders, 771 overs to 760 unders. So that's what we're seeing in college basketball right now, and that's what we all got on Sunday. Now let's take a look at what we've been getting in the SEC with our good friend Blake Lovell of Southeastern 16. Next right here on Coast to Coast with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the Beeson Family Podcast. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the VC Family Podcast. Always great to be joined by this man as we got Blake Lovell aboard. He does such great work over at Southeastern 16, taking a look at this wonderful game of basketball that we all know and love. He is locked in on a conference in the SEC that has been just tremendous this season, so we've got a lot to parse through there. You're able to follow him on Twitter/X at the Blake Lovell, and he also does some great work over at Clutch Point Sports, that app/website that does tremendous work as well, and it's always great to be able to get you aboard, Blake. Thank you so much.
You got it, Greg. Thanks as always for having me.
Blake, let's just start out with it. You're over there at Southeastern 16. Just what has been the hubbub and the buzz about this conference been all about? Because it has been incredible the way that they dump trucked the ACC and the challenge, and just what we've been seeing nationally from these teams like Auburn, from these teams like Tennessee, that time and time again have just gotten the job done this year.
Yeah, I mean, it has been remarkable. You know, Greg, I've been covering the SEC for quite a while. There are others who have covered it longer than I have, but I can't imagine there's been a better start for the league to this point, just based on, again, seeing teams not only win big games, but for the most part, also seeing teams take care of business against teams they should take care of business against. And that has kind of been the knock on the SEC in recent years. We go back and just felt like teams were losing games that they simply shouldn't lose, bye games, multiple ones getting lost, in non-conference play. Not to say that can't still happen over the next several weeks, but I think you've seen a league that is, again, won the games they should win. At times, they're winning them the way they should win them in dominant fashion. And I think that is, certainly stood out, in addition to just picking up so many quality wins to this point with all of these, heavyweight teams at the top. But even beyond that, I mean, we kind of look at it, and we always talk about, bad loss avoidance, Greg. When we get towards the NCAA tournament into February, we're looking at resumes and all that. And, it's like in the SEC, who's a bad loss right now? Like, there just aren't any teams. Maybe South Carolina, who's 6-3, but like outside of that, even South Carolina in the metrics are pretty high for most, teams. And so I think that when you look at it from that standpoint, it's about as good of a start as you could ask for. And again, when you add that to the great wins across the board, whether it's Kentucky, having Gonzaga and Duke as wins, Auburn, beating Houston and Iowa State, and keep going down the line. Tennessee's got good wins, Alabama, and so forth. Yeah, it's been pretty remarkable.
Yeah, it has been really remarkable with what we've seen. And that team that I feel like is the top in all of college basketball showed it once again on Sunday, with Richmond not being able to get a single point in the final 5+ minutes against Auburn. Auburn really flexing their muscle in that game. And for Auburn, even though they lose that game against Duke, I've just been so impressed by what I've seen out of them. Just talk to me about what you've seen from this Auburn team, because for me, they have been, in my opinion, the most complete team in all of college basketball.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that they certainly have looked apart to this point, and their only blemish is a 6-point road loss at Duke, where they simply had a chance towards the end there to win the game, knowing that was going to be a big challenge in that arena and such. And so I think when you look at it with Auburn, when you have what I still think is the best player in the country in Broome leading the way, that's a good start. But I think we've also just seen, the depth just continue to form with this team. And coming into the season, one of the things we talked about with Auburn is we knew they were going to be one of the most experienced teams out there in terms of the roster that they were going to sport, with having a Denver Jones, Miles Kelly, Chad Baker-Mazara, Chaney Johnson, Broome, like having those guys in basically your starting roles, and then bringing back a Dylan Cardwell and guys like that. But, it's really been someone like Tahad Pettiford, a true freshman stepping up and just playing a big role on this team. So they have been kind of the complete package to this point. Their defensive numbers are really good, and they played some really good offensive teams, but their offensive numbers have just simply been spectacular when you look at the way they've been able to score. And I think maybe one of the most surprising parts of that has been how efficient they've been from three, around the top 50 or so nationally in three-point percentage right now. Miles Kelly's been a big help in that regard. I think when you just look at it from top to bottom, having a true star in Broome, having what I think is guard play that has probably exceeded expectations for some people, and then just having the depth that they have and being able to turn to a lot of different guys, that's been the difference in them getting these high-profile wins. And, hey, oh, by the way, they've still got a couple more opportunities. They're going to play Ohio State on Saturday, and they turn around the following Saturday and play Purdue before they get into conference play.
No rest for the weary when it comes to Auburn. They really loaded up that schedule, and they've been able to overcome all of it thus far, as Blake Lovell does such great work over at Southeastern 16. He's joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops, and there's been very few disappointments out there in the SEC thus far. Kentucky, what they were able to do against Gonzaga, that was absolutely incredible. You mentioned it with South Carolina. Even they just completely dump truck Boston College in the SEC ACC Challenge as well. But how about Arkansas, a team that it feels like we just haven't seen the fullest form of them quite yet, just because John L. Davis has not really been able to get going. I know that they've been dealing with a few injuries. Jonas Adu has not been 100% thus far. What are your thoughts on Arkansas, a team that right now is not really being regarded as one of those best teams in the SEC, but I think that there might be some upside here?
There's definitely upside with Arkansas. I don't disagree at all. I think that they certainly have the kind of upside you need to, make the NCAA tournament, win a game or two and such. But I'll tell you, the thing that surprised me so far about Arkansas is when you look at, if you just look at the KenPom numbers, which you can go deeper and look at other metrics as well and see the same thing. But in terms of like their offensive numbers, I think right now as it stands, we look at offensive ratings, they're the second worst offensive team in the SEC, which again, we're talking about the best conference in the country. A lot of elite offensive teams, especially with those probably 5, 6, 7 teams at the top who have just been really hard to stop to this point and have kind of carried, themselves with their offense. But if you look at it from that standpoint, that's a little surprising because like you mentioned, I think we're expecting a lot more from Davis, but I think he's also been one of those guys that, whether they say it or not, I think you can tell injury could still be playing a factor with him. Jonas Adu, finally plays what you feel like should be a normal allotment of minutes for him, 27 minutes against UTSA, hadn't played more than 12 before that. And we're talking about a guy that was, potentially first team all SEC at many points last season at Tennessee. So when you look at the injuries in Brazil, we've seen it there. And you just keep going down the line with the injuries. I think that is what is really standing out with Arkansas. They have the potential to get there eventually. And we always say that Cal's teams play their best once we get later into the season. But right now, if you're trying to place Arkansas in the SEC pecking order, there aren't many teams maybe you're going to put them ahead of right now, just because look at what Missouri just did. They just beat Kansas, the number 1 team in the country. So does Missouri have a higher profile than Arkansas right now? Perhaps. LSU's been pretty strong. Are they bigger than Arkansas right now? I don't know. But I think you're looking at, again, all these teams ahead of Arkansas, Georgia, Oklahoma, Ole Miss, Mississippi State, teams like that who have just continued to handle their business. And Arkansas to this point just doesn't really have what you would consider a huge quality win on their resume, which probably right now Lipscomb would be their best win. First game of the season. They'll get a great opportunity on Tuesday against Michigan. But I think you want to see them win games like this because they've lost the one against Illinois, lost the one against Baylor. Nice comeback win at Miami, but as you know, Greg, that's not exactly a high-profile win these days for a Miami team that's 3-6. You want to start seeing what they can do against these better teams, and they need to step up and get a big win, I think, on Tuesday against Michigan.
Yep, they certainly are going to need to step up, be able to get some of those wins because right now in the SEC, it is an arms race with so many teams that have looked so good. Heck, even Vanderbilt putting together some nice wins, being able to win in the great state of Texas against TCU. The list goes on and on. And how about if we go back to a team that I mentioned a few minutes ago in Kentucky, as they've already knocked off Duke. They pull off that massive comeback against Gonzaga. Just what do we make out of Kentucky team that I felt like they were the biggest question mark in the SEC coming into the season. But right now they look like one of the most sure things because they've got a lot of experience and you've got a team that can just put up points upon everyone not named Clemson, apparently.
Yeah, I think Kentucky's depth has been the biggest thing that has stood out so far to me. And of course, they're going to be tested with that as they move forward because Kerr Kriisa, we know, is injured. Lamont Butler didn't play, in that game against Gonzaga, and they still won. That's what's most remarkable to me is that they won that game without, your leader on the court, your true point guard, and they still found a way to win the game. But like I said, now you've got Kriisa who's going to be out for at least several weeks, it seems like, with the foot injury and such. And so that depth's going to be tested, but it's really stood out to this point, and I think that's what's been most impressive is just seeing how different guys can step up the way that they have for this Kentucky team. One night it may be Otega Oweh. Again, Greg, think about our discussions going into the season. We talked about him a little bit, but we weren't sure if he was going to be, this completely high profile, leading the way type guy that he has been for Kentucky. But he just is there every single game. He's consistent, rock solid as it gets. Or is it going to be Andrew Carr, right? Is it going to be Amari Williams? And you just keep going down the line. Jackson Robinson, future NBA guy. There are just so many different options on this team. And I think the coaching tendencies as well. We'd be kidding ourselves if we didn't bring up the difference between, I think, for Kentucky fans, how Mark Pope has coached this team this year versus their frustrations they had with John Calipari coaching their team the past several years. I think you've seen a lot more of those kind of adjustments, the willingness to maybe try different things, be a much more, I think, sort of cerebral team offensively, even though they're getting up and down the floor. They're still able to run a lot of good sets. And the defense, too. I think that's something Kentucky doesn't get enough credit for, is how well they've defended, especially in crucial moments. So, yeah, this Kentucky team, I mean, how many teams in the country right now can say they have wins over Duke and Gonzaga? To this point, a month into the season, very impressive. Their only blemish at Clemson, which, again, I may talk about Clemson in a second, Greg, but I just think what Kentucky has done to this point way further along than I honestly expect them to be.
Yeah, with Kentucky, I am very surprised by them as well. It has been remarkable what we've been seeing on that front, and just in SEC that in general is right now, in my opinion, by far the top team in all of college basketball is Blake Lovell, who's joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. He does amazing work over at Southeastern 16. He does an amazing job of looking at the conference, and the one team that we haven't talked about so much because they've just been a little bit more out of sight, out of mind this week has been Tennessee. We saw what they were able to do over Feast Week as well. Just where do we put them in terms of conference hierarchy? Because when we think Tennessee, we think of rock solid defense. We were thinking that maybe it was just because of Dalton Connect last year that offense was so good. But Chaz Lanier has been very good for this team. You've got one of the best facilitators in all of college basketball in Zakiya Ziegler. And this is another team that has been oh so impressive.
I always say I'm not big on the AP poll and such. I mean, it is what it is. But Tennessee is going to be the number one team in the country on Monday, and I think they should be based on, everything that's sort of happened around them. But what else, like you mentioned, can you say about this team where you knew defensively coming into the season, they were going to be what they always are under Rick Barnes? And I think sometimes we take that for granted. I mean, it is just remarkable to see what they do every year defensively. I mean, the past 5 seasons, they've been, a top 5 defensive team in the country. And just being able in this era, in the transfer portal era, to go out and identify the guys that need to keep you as a top 5 defensive team in the country for that long is as good as it gets coaching-wise. And they've been able to do that. Yes, we've talked about offensive lulls over the years and all that. And we wondered, were there going to be offensive lulls this year without Dalton Connect? Well, one of the things I think we said coming into the season was, is it unfair to just assume that Chaz Lanier is going to be the one guy who's going to be able to replace Dalton Connect? We're like, well, come on, we can't expect that, right? Dalton Connect's a different beast. But now I'm not so sure, Greg, because Chaz Lanier has been fantastic recently. When you look at just the point total, 26, 25, 26, 3 of his last 4 games, that's been how much he scored. And, he's being able to knock down threes as well. He's did it 4 threes at least in the last 4 games, had the 6th one against Virginia, 7 against Baylor. If that's what they're going to get out of Chaz Lanier, which at this point we should expect that, then Tennessee is going to be probably a top 5 team the rest of the season, because defensively there's going to be no let up. We know what they're going to do to you. We've seen it to so many opponents. They have just dominated everyone in their path to this point. They got a tricky game coming up at Illinois next Saturday. That will be a big test, I think, for them. And then, of course, once you get into SEC play, they're going to lose games somewhere, just like everybody else is. No matter how good they are, that's how tough this league is. But I think Tennessee looks like the best team in the country right now. You can certainly argue, is that, Auburn right in there with them? I would say absolutely. But to this point, they have been almost about as flawless as you can ask for with this team. And like I said earlier, I was the person coming into the season, Greg, and said, I may not be as high on Tennessee because I wanted to see what the offense was going to look like. Well, I've seen what the offense looks like. And if it's this the rest of the season, they're going to have a chance to not only win an SEC championship, but win a national championship.
I'm right there with you. It is so impressive what we're seeing just throughout the conference. And this is going to be a really tough question to ask, but who's that team that might be a little bit out of sight, out of mind? We might have already addressed it, that you really look at in the conference. Because when you look at all 16 teams, I think that all 16 teams have the potential, perhaps other than South Carolina, to be able to make the NCAA tournament, to be able to make a little bit of a run, as pretty much all these teams now, including Missouri, knocking off Kansas, have a good win on the resume. But who's that one team that maybe isn't getting as much love as they deserve, that you're saying watch out for them? Because every year in the SEC, we see one of those teams that has a rough non-conference go 500 or above 500 in conference play and stun everyone.
Yeah, you said Missouri. I think a lot of people have their attention now after winning that game against Kansas. But if you want to go beyond Missouri, I'll say it's Georgia, because I think Georgia to this point, 8-1 on the season. They lost that game against Marquette, which, as we know, no shame in that, based on what we've seen Marquette do to this point. The win over St. John's, I mean, that's looking pretty good still. And I think it's one of those teams, with Mike White, where we knew, like, as he was building at Georgia, and it's hard to believe too, Greg. Almost to me, it feels like he's been there much longer than he has. But, like, this is only his third season there. And we remember what he took over in that first year. We said it's going to take a little while for him to be able to, I think, get this program back to where it needs to be. But an 8-1 start, they have looked really, really good at times. I think, again, you're talking about a team that's been pretty balanced. And the defensive end, that is what's really stood out with this Georgia team. They have been defending like no one. I mean, they have been fantastic on that side. And they got size. And I think that's what stands out, too, about Georgia when you watch them. Asa Newell, the freshman, 6'11", who has been just tremendous. But, like, their guards are big. You've got an R.J. Godfrey in there who we keep saying, look at what he contributed last year on that Clemson team. And he's kind of playing somewhat of a similar role, I'd say, a little bit more minutes maybe for this Georgia team, but someone who isn't necessarily going to have to be the guy that goes out and scores a ton of points, but he's giving you quality minutes, helping you on the defensive end, those kind of things. And so I think Georgia's a team to keep an eye on because Newell is one of the best freshmen in the SEC. I think Dakota LaFew is a guy that's not being talked about enough right now. He has been great for Georgia, and I just think that they're a team that not a lot of people have their eye on maybe just yet, but I would not be surprised at all. They've got an interesting game coming up against Grand Canyon next Saturday. After that, 3 very winnable home games, Buffalo, Charleston Southern, South Carolina State. And then, Greg, they enter the gauntlet known as SEC play. I think their first 5 games I was looking at earlier, at Ole Miss, home against Kentucky, home against Oklahoma, at Tennessee, home against Auburn. That's a tough slate. Everybody's got a tough slate in the SEC, but Georgia's the team that probably enough people are not talking about right now.
Yeah, this Georgia team, I think, is one that is going to be able to ascend when it comes to SEC play. And we saw with them last year as well. It wasn't quite enough to make the NCAA tournament. They made the NIT, but they had themselves a quality run in SEC play. And hey, we saw it out of LSU last year as well. So we've got a lot of interesting teams in the SEC. It has been by far the most dominant conference in all of college basketball. And Blake, you do a great job of covering it all. Let the good people at home know what's all on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Yeah, always appreciate it, Greg. Yeah, you can find us on YouTube, Southeastern 16. We pretty much do daily SEC basketball shows there. And, of course, everything else college basketball related, you can follow me on Twitter /X at the Blake Lovell.
And Blake doing an absolutely amazing job taking a look at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. Every single time he joins me, lends such great insights, and did so once again today. So big thanks to Blake for joining me on Cuss Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. And coming up next, it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Monday as we hit some bank shots. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Cuss Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Always great to be joined by Blake Lovell. He does such a tremendous job over at Southeastern 16. Taking a look at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. Every single time he joins me, lends such great insights. Certainly been a great year in the SEC, and it's always a great time to be able to get him aboard. So big thanks to Blake for joining me in the last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Monday as we hit some bank shots.
Most financial establishments close at a certain time, but not here. It is time for a side and total on every game on today's betting board bank shots.
Do note that as per usual, any changes that are made to these plays will be listed up on my Twitter /X feed at GNet_D1, and we're going to be going in Las Vegas rotation order, which is really easy. The games that are not involving the SWAC, the MEAC, and also those two conferences, those are going to be the games up top in time order, and then the game involving Charleston Southern and South Carolina State and Hofstra versus Norfolk State, those will be the last 2 games. So how about if we do get things started with 871, 872, it is Minnesota, and they are on the road. They're facing off against Indiana. Indiana's a 9.5 to a 10-point favorite. Total on this game is 140. By the way, I'm just doing write-ups for all 5 games because it's just such a small card in general, but that said, this is a game where I'm going to be willing to lay up to 10 with Indiana. For Minnesota, it's just been off-putting what we've seen in terms of this offense. Now, the defense has been rock solid. They're a top 30 team in all of college basketball in terms of points allowed on a per-possession basis, and that's a big reason why my write-up here will be on the under in this game, set by total at a 134.5, and it's a Minnesota team that's outside the top 350 in terms of total possessions per game. Love what I'm seeing out of Dawson Garcia. 19 points, 7 5.5 boards, shooting in the mid-30s from three-point, and now they are getting back Mike Mitchell. Played in that game against Michigan State. He had 17 points, so that helps out quite a bit, but they have yet to get Tyler Cochran out there on the floor. Who knows when he's going to be returning. Lucille Patterson has had to be the main facilitator with Mitchell out of the fold, but now how they divvy up those duties, that's going to be a little bit TBD because Patterson is just not an off-the-ball scorer. Not a guy that really shoots it too well from three-point range. And Femi Odekale, he's a nice stat sheet stuffer in terms of giving you 4.5 boards, 3.5 assists, a little bit over 2 steals per game, only giving you about 5 points per game as well. And then for Indiana, need to clean up the turnovers outside the top 250 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, but should be able to dominate this game down low, even with Garcia on the flip side. We've got Umar Bellows averaging darn near double-double, 13 points, 9 boards, 2 blocks per contest. Malik Renew is able to give you 6.5 boards, a little bit of versatility, and Mackenzie Mbakbo shooting darn near 45% from 3. He's been rock solid. Those 14 turnovers are rough, but you've got Trey Galloway, Miles Rice combining for 7 assists per game, with Rice shooting north of 40% from three-point range. Galloway should see a regression in terms of his 57% three-point shooting, but do think that in the end, Indiana is going to be able to dominate this game down low. Minnesota, always a different team when they're away from the barn as well, so I'm willing to lay up to 10 with Indiana, and then that write-up would be on the under. 873, 874 on the betting board. The Quakers of Penn are on the road against VCU. VCU a 23.5 point favorite total on this game, between 133.5 to a 134. It's at my total 135.5. I'm in on the over. I do think that VCU ascends a little bit with their offense. They're currently outside the top 100 in terms of total points scored on a per possession basis. And for Penn, I believe that they've only covered one game thus far this season, but I think that they make it too. I'm going to be writing them up with the points. As for Penn, they've actually been a far better defensive team when they've been on the road rather than at home. Overall, they entered into Sunday 312th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but on the road, they're actually a top 150 defense. I think that their three-point shooting will be able to build up a little bit more. They're shooting 28.5% from three-point range, but the Army transfer, Ethan Roberts, has led the way with 17 points per contest and have good versatility in Nick Spinoza, 12.7 boards, 3 assists at 6'8". He's able to be a little bit of a point forward. Now VCU should be able to overwhelm with that backcourt with Max Shulga being a do-it-all sort of guy. 16 points, 4 assists, 6 boards, shooting 41% from 3, but VCU has been turning the ball over about 13.5 times per game. It is a Penn team, has been one of the more less than savory defenses in terms of guarding the arc and all of college basketball. And Penn, not a team that's going to put a whole lot of defensive pressure on you. You don't have a single guy in the roster that gives you north of a steal per game. It's really going to be up to guys like a Dylan Williams being able to step up for Penn. You could use a bit more out of someone even like a George Smith, who's only been able to give you about 4 points per contest this year. After in previous years, he had shown some promise, was able to give you like 4 rebounds per game, 5 to 6 points per contest, so going to need a little bit more there. And then Jack Clark down low for VCU, pretty solid, 6.5 boards per game. He is a very well-traveled man, back in the Atlantic 10 for a second time after he began his career over at LaSalle, but I do think that this number is getting up a little bit too lofty. Even though VCU is one of the best teams at generating turnovers in all of college basketball, I just don't think that they execute quite enough offensively to be able to cover this big a number. So did somebody total 135.5? I'm in on the over, and I'll be writing up those points with Penn. This last game on the normal Las Vegas betting board before we hit those extra games. This is 875, 876. Abilene Christian is on the road. They're facing off against Baylor, and Baylor does find themselves as a 20 to a 21 point favorite. Totals between 141.5 to a 142.5. A little bit undecided as to whether I'm going to write up Baylor or the over, but do like the over, and I do like Baylor on this line. I set Baylor as a 22.5 point favorite, and the big reason why Baylor over the last few years has been such a better offensive team when they've been at home rather than on the road. For Baylor, they are tops in all of college basketball in terms of points scored on a per possession basis at home. On the road, they are well outside the top 50. You've got Nochad Omier, who's averaging a double-double, 15.5 points, 7 boards, going against an Abilene Christian team that they're always rock solid in terms of being able to generate turnovers. They've been a nice defensive team, but for Abilene Christian, I think a lot of people would be surprised. They've been much better with their offense when they've been away from home rather than at home. Top 50 team in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis away from home. At home, not so much, but you got Hunter Jackman, who's able to shoot 40.5% from 3, 11.5 points per contest. It's a whole is greater than the sum of its parts team, with having Keon Williams, Leonardo Batil, who have come in. They've been able to combine for about 29 points, 9.5 boards, like what these guys are bringing to the table, but darn near everyone is able to generate a turnover or two for this team. Rich Smith has been a relatively nice non-D1 transfer that has come in. He's been able to give the team some rebounding and a bit of facilitation as well. 3+ assists in 2 out of the last 4 games. So been liking what I'm seeing there. But for this Baylor team, you've got Jeremy Roach in the backcourt. He's been able to do a nice job popping him from 3 as Robert Wright III has really become that main facilitator for the team as he's been able to give out 4.5 assists per game. They've been dealing with a little bit of an ailment to VJ Edgecombe. We have yet to see him here in the month of December, so his status a little bit in question for this game as he hasn't done a lot of scoring with 11 points per game on 27% 3-point shooting, but he chips in there a block and a half, 2 steals, 5.5 boards, so he does a nice job being able to do the little things for the team. But even if he's out, you've got Jaden Nunn who's shooting 49% from 3-point range. I do think that even though Abilene Christian is outside the top 225 in terms of total possessions per game, that you do get enough for the over just because of the overall offensive efficiency that we've been seeing out of Baylor thus far this season. So I'm in on the over, and I'm willing to lay up to 22 with Baylor, and now we hit those 2 extra games.
The normal betting board picks are complete, but there are some extra games today, so we go into the bonus.
306-595, 306-596. Charleston Southern is going to be on the road against South Carolina State. South Carolina State 1 to 1.5 point favorites. Totals between 142.5 to 143.5. I'm just going to write up Charleston Southern in this one as I did set them as a 1-point favorite. We've already seen Charleston Southern hit the road and be able to get an outright win against Miami, and they face off against a South Carolina State team that's had a tough time taking care of the ball outside the top 290 in terms of total possessions that end in a turnover, so that's not great. You've got Drayton James, who's been solid down low, 11.5 points, 5 boards. He stands right around about 6'11", but they just don't have that main facilitator. Mitchell Taylor is giving you about 2.2 assists per game. Meanwhile, RJ Johnson on the flip side for Charleston Southern, shooting north of 40% from 3, 14 points, 4.5 assists per game. You've got Tajay Kelly, you should be able to win that battle down low, 16 points, 7.5 rebounds, and if they can get something out of Lamar Odin Jr., he's the transfer that comes in from Drexel. He was over at Drexel a few seasons ago, 43.5% 3-point shooter. Hasn't been able to hit that, shall we say, top-notch force this season, but 8 points, 4 boards per contest. That'll be something that'll be unlocked for our Charleston Southern team that does need to calm it down with the turnovers. They're turning the ball over about 13.5 times per game. They have been outside the top 250 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but just really giving you a much better effort now than they did towards the front end of the season. They've been able to get to at least 72 points each of the last 3 games, and this is a South Carolina State team that they do need to tie things up with regards to their defense as well. At home, they are the second worst team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis at home, so I did set my total at 147. You've got a South Carolina State team that they're not super duper fast, but they're in the upper half of all of college basketball in terms of total possessions per game. This is a Charleston Southern team that's not tried to run as well, and for Charleston Southern, they themselves have given up 73 plus in 3 of their last 4 games, so I'm in on the over in this spot, so by total 147, and I do like Charleston Southern. I'll write on the money line, made them the 1-point favorite, and wrap things up with 306-597, 306-598. Norfolk State is going to be playing against Hofstra. Pride of Hofstra are 2.5-point underdogs, so it's between 131.5 to 132. Just a far cry from what we've seen from this Hofstra offense in the past. They are currently outside the top 300 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and they still don't really create a lot of ball pressure as well outside the top 300 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis on defense. So I did set Norfolk State as a 5-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number as they also have the top scorer in this game, Brian Moore Jr., who has been able to give you more. He's not going to continue to shoot 68.8% from 3-point range, but guys come in from Murray State to be able to give you 20 plus points per contest, and for Norfolk State, typically their biggest kryptonite is down low. You don't have a single guy that gives you north of 5 rebounds per game, though they've been mixing and matching guys like Jalen Myers, Jelani Darden, Tyler Bladen. They're giving you between about 4.4 to 4.9 rebounds per game. But on the flip side for Hofstra, this is a team that has consistently one of the lesser teams in all of college basketball with regards to rebound rate, albeit it's better this year with bringing in Michael Graham, who began his career over at Elon and Loyola Marymount, 7.7 boards per contest, and they do still have someone in Silas Sunday who's stands 7 feet tall, just has never really found his footing in terms of the system, and he's been only able to give you about 3.5 points per contest, so a little bit of liability on the offensive side of things. For Hofstra, you've been able to get some good production out of Gene Amarujian, who's been able to give you 13 points per game, and Cruz Davis, the former Iona standout, he's been able to give you 15 points, 4 assists, shooting in the mid-30s from 3-point range, but you can only lose so many guards before you start to feel it. Like Darlstone Dubar leaves this offseason. We know that they used to have Aaron Action Estrada and guys like that in the backcourt. They're really trying to be able to replace those guys. Not going so well for them against D1 competition. This team has been held below 70 points at each of their last 4 games. Meanwhile, you've got a Norfolk State team that has actually been able to do a really good job flowing some nice offense, getting to 73 plus each of their last 3 games. Christian Ings has done a nice job, giving you about 4 assists, 13.5 points per contest. It is a Norfolk State team that they have been well outside the top 200 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis themselves, but with 70 points or fewer surrendered in 4 of their last 5 games, do think that they're starting to round into form. Did sell my total at 137. I do think that Hofstra are going to find a little bit more offense in this one, but I think the Norfolk State going to be able to take it to a Hofstra team that really doesn't create a lot of turnovers, which can sometimes be the kryptonite for this Norfolk State team, as they this season have been turning the ball over about 12 times per contest. So I do like the over in this spot, and I'm going to be willing to lay with Norfolk State. Norfolk State also shooting darn near 79% at the free throw line in a nip and tuck game, and that'll wrap things up for the Monday edition of Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Big thanks to Blake Lovell, who does great work over at Southeastern 16. He joined me in the last segment. If you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcast, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of 2 ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at GNN_D1. Keep in mind, letters EM, they mean does not matter. So, per usual, please do send these into the timeline. The other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review, and I'm coming at you guys every single day on this podcast throughout the college basketball season, so I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you.